coming our way. Yep. Got my foot off the gas, so this is just
seeing those buildings. There's no way. Okay.
As we go forward, shoot back.
Yeah.
Let's catch
Pretty much loaded. And you get there.
All right, we're rolling.
All right. So, my first question for you is, what is your name? Could you spell it for us? And what is your title?
My name is Colleen Bowers, and I'm a park ranger here at Carvers Creek State Park. My name is spelled Colleenbowers.
Great. And what could you tell us a little bit about what wildlife is found in this park?
Well, we have quite a bit of wildlife here with this Sandhills ecosystem. We're very diverse. We have some of your typical things. We have coyote, bobcat, squirrels, but we also have fox squirrel. We have Bachman sparrow. We have the pine barrens tree frog, which are things that you can only find in a Sandhills habitat.
What is it about the habitat here at Carvers Creek State Park that makes it, habitable for ticks?
Ticks, I think ticks can pretty much inhabit anywhere that's not too cold, of course, because they are sensitive to temperatures. But we have a lot of grass, and they like to hang out on grass, which is, where they sit and wait for wildlife to come by. I don't know that there's anything more significant about a Sandhills type ecosystem versus a pine hardwood mix forest.
And if you were to give advice to a person that came to the park in terms of how to be protected or how to prevent tick bites, what would it be?
I would just tell them what I typically do, and I would tuck my pants into my socks and my shoes. Some people like to use duct tape around the bottom of their shoes and socks. Of course, insect repellent. Try and stay on the trail. We tell a lot of people, when you go off trail, that's when you typically get ticks and chiggers and things like that. So we try to tell people stay on the trail because there's no grass on the trails. So you're typically not going to run into ticks there.
And what about, say, for some reason you do go into the grass or you go near the grass, what would you do afterwards to check for ticks?
Well, I mean, as long as you check within 24 hours, you're doing pretty good. So I always, anytime I have a school group here or anything, I just say, make sure that you guys either check for ticks yourself or have your parents check for ticks, or, when you get home, make sure that you check. Because like I said, if you get them off within 24 hours, you should be okay.
Have you yourself ever been bitten by a tick?
I have. I've had quite a few ticks on me in the past. I've never been sick from one.
Any...
Michaela, when she finishes her answer, just count 1, 2, just so she may want to add something to the thought, or you may actually step on the last word she says. So when she finishes, just wait an extra 2 seconds before you talk.
Any anecdotes or funny stories of a tick or tick stories that you can think of?
Well, typically when you're talking about ticks, you don't really have too many funny stories. We do like to pick on our park superintendent, Jane Connolly. Every time we go out, she gets ticks on her. So we usually say, oh, they're going to swarm to Jane and keep away from us. So that's really the only joke we can think of for ticks.
Those are the questions I have.
Okay.
Anything else we need? You might ask her to talk a little bit about why people are interested in this park. What is it about this park that's really unique?
So what is it about this park that is unique or special?
So, of course, every park in North Carolina has something that's special and unique. Carvers Creek State Park, I fell in love with it for a few reasons. It's one of the newest state parks in the system, so we're still growing continuously. And so it's always exciting to be able to work on something new. But we also have the longleaf pine here, and it is an ecosystem that needs fire to reproduce. The seeds won't sprout out without fire. The wiregrass that survives in this type of ecosystem has to have fire to even produce seeds. So it's very unique in that way. And then along with that, we have a lot of endangered and rare species, like the red cockaded woodpecker. It's an endangered species that is found here at the park, and it's because of that longleaf pine wiregrass ecosystem that they are here and not anywhere else.
What do you love about your job?
I love the fact that every day is different. We, as park rangers, we are required to do interpretation and education, which is my favorite part of the job. It's why I decided to become a park ranger, is to be able to teach our young generation about the environment and kind of try and get them to love it as much as I do is a goal of mine. But we're also required to be law enforcement, so we're here to protect the natural resources and the people that come and visit the park. We're here to protect those natural resources, and in that comes with the burning, the prescribed burning that we do here. We do a lot of invasive and non-native removal to try and keep it as natural as possible. We also are here to any search and rescue, any medical. We're trained in all of that. So at any given point, I could be called out for anything. And so it's a typical day in the life of a ranger is not typical. It's different every day. So that's my favorite part about it.
What about the people that come here? What kinds of people do you get in the park?
So we have a lot of people that love to come and walk their dogs. They love to come and do their exercise routine here, whether it's jogging or just walking the trails. We are a day use area, so we don't have anything like camping and things like that. But we do have our 2 trails here that are just over 3 miles. So they're nice daily exercise areas. And then we do have people that come for our education programs. We do history hikes and nature hikes, tours of the Rockefeller House, things like that. People love to come for our education programs. There's a gator coming.
Rolling.
Is he about to open the other door?
Oh, we were so close. Wow, we're rolling.
Do you know what the effect of the prescribed burns are or is on the woodpecker?
So the red cockaded woodpecker has to have open areas to forage in, which is one of the other reasons why they like to be in longleaf pine. And of course that burning the understory, all of the oaks and shrubs and things like that that would grow up and kind of cover everything and make it not a very good foraging area for the birds. That fire helps with that. So that's one of the reasons why they like the longleaf pine, and you have to have prescribed fire in those areas for them to forage.
What about the Rockefeller House? What's the status of the innovation for that house?
So the NC Connect bond that was passed in 2016 gave us money to work on the restoration of the Rockefeller House. So we are still in the planning stages for that. So we don't really know exactly all of what's going to happen with the house. We just know that it's coming in the future.
I think we're fine. Thank you.
Okay?
But we do need some B-roll.
And I think the site we're going to go to is going to be popular because Fayetteville is good.
let John ride with you?
All right, hopefully this starts because it was dead this morning. Ah!
Good. Are you gonna take some for social media?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Everybody ready?
No, wait. I didn't lock up. Just do that. I'll catch you. We have extra batteries. They should be in the utility. Yep.
So we've got a corner coming up that's a little, it's got some dead sand in it, so just be careful as we're going around this corner. to take them around because I think they're gonna film the briefing, and then I told them that I got duties and I gotta be able to listen to this. I said, but
As long as you've got someone like you, or I just want to have a baby.
Yeah, I figured that I was it.
Okay.
I just assumed I was it.
You've got-
Unless you want to do it. The original plan was to burn this whole thing, but it
Well,
got changed.
modified
Yeah,
because the weather up until this morning had been
was
Cat 1.
yes.
With a Cat
So-
1, we could burn this. We couldn't burn both
Feel
of them.
tall?
Yeah.
You pass?
Always taller than mine.
Well, I don't know. I left
He left it with Thomas, so he doesn't know. That's funny.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys all for coming out and burning with us today. We are burning Sandhills Unit 1. It is 13 acres. I know this is kind of a small unit for us, but it was planned this way because we were supposed to have a Category 1 today. So this was the biggest we would be able to do on this particular day. So we are going to try and take this kind of slow because we do have the video crew with us today. Everybody's got a map? Okay. The terrain for this, there is about a 25-foot change in elevation from right here at Alpha all the way down to Bravo. Right here before these RCW trees, there is a little dip and then it kind of goes uphill. So just remember when we're burning this off, we need to make sure we get these RCW trees ringed around before we send fire up that little hill that we have there.
They haven't been raked?
They have been. The fuel in here, we do have some oaks right up here at the front, but then as we go down the hill a little ways, it's mostly just pine and grass. The weather for today, our temperature high is supposed to be around 76. Our humidity low is supposed to be around 50. Wind direction is south at 3 miles per hour. Our fuel moisture in here, we've had about a quarter inch of rain in the past 7 days. It did rain a little bit last night. Our 1 hour fuels are at 6%, 10 are at 8, and 100 are at 16%. This unit was last burned in February of last year, and then it was also burned in October of the year 2015. TNC burned this in conjunction with Unit 1 last year.
Nope.
They didn't? That's what my record said. What do you?
This was burned in the winter when you burned it, and that was burned
So they didn't.
fall and spring. We did not burn that again.
Oh, okay. My map said that we did. So, okay. I'll fix that when I get back to the office. So, October 2015 is the last time this was burned. Objectives for today, we do have the UNC students, professor, and camera with us today. So that was the main reason for this particular burn on this particular day. But of course, reduction of fuels, keep it on a rotation, and then we're gonna try and reseed this after we burn it, so. For medical, Jane is a former EMT. Me and Cockburn are first responders, and Mike Taylor, first responders. The address here, or the address at the end of the road, is 1419 Johnson Farm Road. Communications, we will be on channel 9 talk around. And if anybody needs me by cell phone, my cell phone number is 336-225-6346. So, assignments for today. we are going to have the Alpha to Bravo boss is going to be Seth. And you are going to have your cruise engine and our fire truck. And I want you to stage the cruise engine right here, just in case we need it. And then you can have our truck just keep bumping along the line. And you are going to have Israel and John with you. And then our Alpha to Charlie Bravo crew boss is going to be Keith. Keith, you are going to have Cockburn's truck and the Gator. And of course, you're going to have Cockburn, Jane, and Mike with you. And then we're going to have an ignition boss today, Jimmy. And Jimmy's going to have Nick and Preston. So the plan for today is we're starting up here at Alpha. We're going to try and get this Alpha to Charlie line, get some black up here because we do have a south wind. So we're going to try and blacken this out. And then depending on the intensity, we might run some interior flanks or dots in here. Like I said, remember there's a little dip here. We need to make sure we get these RCW trees fired around before we make that run. Contingency plans, there is a line on this side of the unit that we can jump over into. And then of course, if it does cross this line here, we do have a line all the way around this unit too. Escape routes and safety zones. So if you're towards the north, we do have the big area where we just came from right there at the shop. And then of course the flat top out that way. If you keep going straight down this way, it leads to the power line and there's like a big intersection there. And then of course that power line leads all the way up to Johnson Farm Road as well. Towards the south, we do have, if you go straight down, we have a creek down here and we also have a creek if you take that left turn there. So we do have those two areas there. Are there any questions?
Who's hanging with the video crew?
I am.
Where's the Gator going?
The Gator is with Keith. Mm-hmm.
My truck will be with them too.
Yeah. Given the loss of Castro, who do you want to be winning?
Somebody on Seth's line to do weather. Seth, you guys have a Kestrel, and then I have a Kestrel.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna put. Yeah, I'll just put John on weather because I'm gonna stick him with our engine and Israel with his engine.
okay. And so, do you want to give him your Kestrel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know if we trust you with Kestrels now.
Valid concern, I think.
Seth, you can probably just
Make him
stage your
sign for
engine
it.
right here.
That's what I'll have him bump it down.
Do we have who does not have a radio? I think we have some radio issues because we've got some.
I'll be in Cockburn's truck if we have it.
Okay, so he'll be in a truck,
So you'll be with Nick.
and Preston's gonna be with Nick, and then
Got a radio in
John.
the truck?
Let's see.
Well, I gotta be in the truck too, so I got this one in it.
I don't have a portable, but I'll have a radio.
It's
in
fine.
mine.
Probably won't.
Okay,
We'll just
in the
stick you and
engine.
John together. We'll just leave the truck here, and if we do need it, I can send John back up to get it.
Okay.
We'll just have y'all partner up together in your engine.
Okay. Awesome.
The unit itself's not that big.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
You can see pretty much all
All the way
down
across.
Oh yeah,
by these hard
small
ones.
unit.
Not anticipating good communication problems.
No,
I'd be able to yell.
You can just yell. So,
you can only play attention to small plantation.
Any other questions, guys?
no, it sounds good.
All right, let's get
Bright
set up.
green. These loblolly pines?
No.
No.
That's a long-leaf straw plantation.
Now, Colleen, you're going to want us to go ahead and establish black from A to B since we're going to be the back wind right here to there. Because the south wind's going to be pushing that way, which is sending the head power our way.
You'll probably end up
Which one's your engine, Israel?
creeping down here.
Yeah.
until-
Yeah, remember
Well,
we
y'all
want
are
to take
per-
it slow.
Until they get,
Oh, I know, but
get this done.
while y'all are burning that out, I can just slowly creep down here and just, because I mean, it's going to be backing.
Yeah.
Backing
But
pipe.
once they get down here and we've got enough black to turn this corner, then
It was going to start,
you'll want
Yeah.
to.
it's just going to pull together since it's so narrow.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I just want you to hold off in the beginning.
We'll take it slow. Yeah, I'll take it real slow while y'all are burning from A to C then.
Let them get. Because really we got for you. We just want to get
from
Yeah.
here to there.
Yeah, I was gonna have Cockburn stage his truck down there, and have the Gator follow this line.
I want to set this black up as much
Yeah,
as we
no, I
can.
agree. Yeah,
And you know how we use that flank deepening technique?
yeah,
Let's just deepen it. Once we get past these oaks,
yeah.
then the speed will pick up.
Right, right.
So let's go. We're going to get the test fire on the ground.
Hey guys, give me 1 second.
Jimmy, it's all here. I'll get it for you.
Guys, give me 1 second. Ready? Go.
All right, we're going to get started. Let's go and get the test fire on the line.
Give me one more.
All right, let's go. We're going to go ahead and get set up and get the test fire on the ground.
What do you hope to accomplish by today's prescribed burn?
So for every burn, we try to have objectives, and I explained that during the briefing. We are trying to reduce the fuel load in here. We do try to we're trying right now to get all of our units on a rotation, and the rotation interval depends on the specific unit. So something like this, we're still trying to get it to where we want it because it was a logged unit. So the last time it was burned, it was in 2015. So it is time for it to be burned again. So reducing that fuel in there, getting rid of some of these oaks that you see in here. This isn't good foraging with all the oaks in here. So we're trying to reduce some of the oaks, reduce the pine straw that's on the ground, those type of things.
And very simply, what's the purpose of reducing the fuel load or the debris on the ground?
So there's a couple reasons in a longleaf pine stand why you'd want to reduce the pine litter. One is for those RCWs, those red cockaded woodpeckers. They need open areas to forage. The other thing is that when the pine trees drop their seeds, if they don't drop it onto bare mineral soil, they will not sprout up. So without us burning and getting rid of this pine straw, they cannot reproduce. So also, there's a lot of wiregrass in here, and we're trying to build up that wiregrass population. So we are, after we burn this, we are going to try and reseed it and get some more wiregrass going in here. And wiregrass does need fire to reproduce. It won't even produce seed unless it's been burned that year.
Any chance that the burn might cut down the number of ticks in this particular area?
I mean, I would assume that there's a mortality rate when in any type of burn with insects, some small mammals, things like that. I don't know that in general, I don't have any evidence that in general that we'll have less ticks, but it makes sense. If we're burning through here and the ticks are on the grass that we're burning up the ticks as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good.
Are we ready for the test fire?
Are they going to start with the drip torches very soon?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
if you can just ask them to hold up until.
What was it?
77 degrees, 59%. Light and variable.
Okay.
Hasn't changed much in the last 30 minutes.
Seth, you want to put the test fire down? Just make sure that he's ready with the camera.
So right now we're watching for fuels are just going in.
How you guys, right?
Did you do that right?
Was that up?
Did you do that right?
I think so. I don't know by now, man.
You're in trouble.
That's trouble. That is for sure. get that truck pumped up, you can just hop out, pull our engine, and just back it in once we get Israel's out of the way. And yeah, like I was saying, you can just hang out with him and
If a
just help
chance,
Honestly,
also
you can probably
mention
just-
that we burn to reduce the risk of wildfires.
I meant to and I
That's
forgot.
It's okay.
It was going
I
through
know,
my head.
I know, and I was
Dang
trying.
it.
I was like, but I didn't want to hit your stride, and I didn't want to mess you up. But
Yeah.
Don't. It's all good. It's all good.
I will try because it was in my mind and I completely forgot.
That corner over
I
there,
understand.
and we
It's
have
rough being in front of the camera,
somewhere.
It's like ah.
and you're burn boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just need to get the perfect burn in here. Yeah. Yep.
I thought it was a nice day before, now I smell smoke.
Yeah. Now it's an awesome day.
Even better.
When Israel moved that into down here.
I think this is only Israel's second burn.
Okay.
So make sure that you're specific with the things you give him because he might not know what you're talking about.
All right, copy.
Because he had a little issues on our last burn with what am I supposed to do? Because I didn't
Okay.
kind of put him in with anybody. So if you just
Okay.
want to kind of
I'll just have
help
so
him walk through
as
and
this carries in
Yep.
and cools down, he can just bump down.
Yep.
I'll just
But you
explain
might
that
have
to him.
to keep in radio contact with him quite a bit and
Okay.
kind of help him out a little bit more.
You got it.
Can we get the traffic jam undone so I can?
As soon as the test fire is over, then we'll do that. He's videotaping the test fire, and then everybody's gonna bump and move.
We'll help you deepen it.
Yeah, Colin, I was disappointed we couldn't shoot the Dragon Ball.
I know. That thing was so cool.
Really thought we were shooting that thing.
I was like, that is awesome. And he was like, well, I'm just gonna it's like, dang it.
May not do too many of those.
Huh?
That's putting a little pressure on your
Yeah.
line right there.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I might put it a little closer. That's actually doing all right. I don't think you're.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
just,
we
just
got.
a heads up. It could
Yep.
try to race. towards
Well,
it.
yeah.
Now I don't think Colleen's looking at me like I lost my mind anymore.
When do I look at you like
that?
Yes.
See why I was concerned with strips?
Yes. I do. That's why
Are you comfortable from a test fire scenario though?
Yes. Yes. And I think he's done filming. Yep.
Yeah, you guys do your thing. Thank you.
Test fire complete. Going full ops.
That was into almost immediately. So we're fighting for like a backfire here to get that makes it about a black. Well, you call that a black line? Yeah, no, well, yeah.
A back line or a back
Black.
Colleen, I'm gonna go ahead and start pushing down a little.
Yeah, I'm gonna bump down in just a second. I need to get them all. So if you guys are gonna,
We're just, sorry, I'm gonna stay with Bob because I want to tell him.
yes.
Where's the battery?
Go ahead. You won't be in Charlie or Bravo.
Let me help you on that. I'm a little nervous. I don't want another kid to Perfect. Yeah.
Has your engine been started today?
No, we need to go ahead and start that thing real quick. It is? Yeah. Oh, it's good, John. It's good. All right.
Israel, have you pumped water here today?
And what I'm probably going to do, Colleen, is pull this down and then hop in there and pull it off the line a little bit.
Okay.
It is going real slow.
Yeah, sounds good.
So you talked about the speed limit. We've got this loose system of sand. Basically, all you, I think they drew it wrong. You can see it right there.
And they're gonna be doing a lot more interior just to keep that, so it doesn't get so hot.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna let that black build off. And I just told him the radio, I mean, when he gets it built off pretty good.
Okay.
Because Keith's progression is gonna be on my progression and the progression of the interior. So.
Sounds good to me.
We'll just go slow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is eating in reasonably well.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Just take it slow.
Take it slow today.
Yeah.
So we're not ringing it today, huh?
No, not ringing it today.
Give me Keith. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah, my line's actually pulling in a little bit right now. Yeah, I see the smoke. Want me to proceed then? Yeah, go ahead and proceed, because it's keeping the pressure off of you. This is just a little top of the hill wind anomaly. We'll keep an eye on it. Good copy.
All right, go ahead and establish this. I'll be pulling this down now. Yeah, we'll take some more on this thing. So actually it's pulling in, so you can remember really quick.
Burn boss to all crew. One thing I forgot to mention in the briefing is we did have some beetle kill in this unit, so we do have a lot of snags. So especially if you're interior, watch out for those snags.
Colleen, you're not transmitting well. Are you on talk around or are you hitting the repeater?
Can you hear me now?
There we go, that's better.
Good copy.
So my last transmission, one of the things I forgot in the briefing is that this unit had a lot of beetle kill in it. And so there are a lot of snags. So especially those of you interior, watch out for these snags in here.
Good copy.
What was the predicted wind?
South. We're getting a little bit
Pretty
of,
good southeast wind right now.
yeah, getting a little bit of a shift.
If that doesn't die down, we're gonna have to warm the backpack. Keep it around a little bit.
Get it to eat up some of those oaks.
Yeah.
Jane, copy direct.
Yeah, just be wary of spots on this side of the unit.
Getting some swirls over there.
Yeah. We're getting good lift though, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be fine. Once we get that road blacked in, kind of out of the woods,
Yeah.
so to speak. Get some good video then. Maybe this white rest, when did this all come up?
I think we've seeded it once before. So we're gonna try and seed it again and see what we get.
It's not bad, it's a little sparse.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some areas down in there where you can actually see the sand through the pine straw, so I don't know how well it's gonna burn through some of these areas, but maybe it'll be good.
Good now, coming out of southwest.
Yeah.
Make up your mind.
Yeah. Jimmy, just a heads up, we're getting really shifty winds out here. We're getting some south, some southeast, some southwest.
Good copy on that, Colleen. We're seeing everything from south in any east or west direction, occasionally switching around on the top of the hill to a little bit of a back north eddy.
That's a good copy.
That's gotta be the road effect.
Yeah. Well, and you've got all these lines in here too.
Yeah. Well, any way you look at it, a strong wind one way or the other.
It's a little warm today, isn't it? Yeah. What's that?
Look back at your map. When I say go, just look in the woods. Go.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh. Oh,
It happens fast and it doesn't happen.
Right, yeah. We're actually looking at 4 houses this weekend
Oh, really?
to buy, yeah. And we're mainly looking at school districts as well,
Yeah.
like good school districts. Rosewood has a good one. There's one house kind of right outside of Goldsboro, kind of towards Kinston, but not toward like 15-year home or something before like let the kids get a little old and stuff. But I'm excited, man. I can't wait.
Well, houses are probably pretty reasonable down there.
They are. They're
Interest rates
you
are
can
so low.
you can find a really nice house for the amount of money. So I mean it's
200,000 get you the house you need.
well if we were going off my wife's income, we would have gone with
Yeah, it's just two.
So we
Yeah.
can
It's
regulate.
The flame intensity picks up a little, and pretty much it's just laying low. Smoke's real low. It's not going very fast, but we are getting a black line in.
That's a good copy.
If you guys want,
While everybody else's service was not good or interrupted, she had sprint international roaming. So she was with our company. But as
Whenever I go home, I use this phone.
go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, we work these deepening flanks all the way over here to Charlie now. So we're just going to let them spread out, build this black good, and then we're going to work our way back over to Seth.
That's a good copy. Are you gonna do dots or flanks?
Probably flanks over near Seth at first, and then we'll start filling back towards Keith with points.
That's a good copy.
All right, go. Good.
Oh yeah, there. Worked. They're good. I just wanted to make sure they were raked around. So yeah, these are, you can see their holes in the trees. And this white stuff that's kind of coming down, that's the resin. So they continuously poke at the tree to make the sap flow. And it makes the outside sticky so snakes and things can't climb up into their hole and eat their babies.
And what are you checking for now?
So right now I'm checking to make sure that this area right around the tree has been kind of cleared around. And the reason why we like to clear around them, when we come in, what we'll do is we'll kind of ring this out right here. So instead of the fire just slamming on this tree and possibly climbing up, because that pine sap is really flammable, what it's going to do is the fire is going to creep outward and away from the tree. So it's just to keep the intensity down around the trees so they don't catch fire.
So this prescribed burn is going to go right through this area.
Yes, but before they bring the fire here, right before they get to the bottom of this like little hill here, they will stop lighting. They'll come up here, they'll take their drip torch and they'll run the rings around each of these and then come back out. And then the fire will come up. But what's going to happen is, because this fire was lit first, this fire, it's going to creep down and slowly creep down this hill. So that way when this fire comes, it's meeting like somewhere in here instead of right up against the tree. So it's going to keep the tree from catching fire.
And how do you know there's a red cockaded woodpecker in that tree?
So some of the things that I just said, the sap that's running down on this, you see how it kind of gets a white look to it with that sap coming down. And then Fort Bragg monitors all of these, and they put these white rings, these white bands on them. They have changed it to green bands, but they did not change these here. And then they also have a silver tag, a round little tag on them that has a specific number that says that those are RCW trees.
There are two big holes.
Yep.
Those two big ones we see about, I don't know, 20 feet below the branching. Is
Yes.
that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
those are the holes.
Yeah.
And the sap, I can.
head fire at it.
Right.
So that's what they're working on right now. Once they get that in, then they can start pulling these lines down a little bit quicker.
I got you. Okay.
We have a south wind, so it's pushing this way. So of course we wouldn't want to start down here because it would send a head fire all the way up. So that's why we started there.
Yeah,
and
we're going to work
slowly
our way
backing.
from over here on the line back towards you, running some.
Copy that, Jimmy. I'm going to continue to move down a little bit while y'all are doing that, and we'll see what happens.
All right, just take it slow. Don't want to wrap us in.
Yeah, Jimmy, I'm probably only about 70 yards from the start, so I think you're good.
You know, we can speed it up in post.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
So there's like probability of ignition, there's relative humidity, there's all of these aspects that basically have to do with the weather that we have to keep an eye on. And the weather's usually taken once an hour. I monitor it and I make sure I write everything down, and then I keep records of all of our burns so that way I can see what it did on the last burn during this, specific weather and conditions and things like that. So I don't know if it's a whole lot of math, it's just a whole lot of weather.
Whole lot of weather? Okay. Bees are in that hole.
If they're in the hole.
Thank
the
you.
bees in the hole.
Oh yeah? It doesn't look like it's an active tree anymore, but they still protect them because the birds could still come back and use them. So.
Technically, didn't mean to interrupt.
Mm.
Is this technically part of Carvers Creek State Park?
Yes, we are still in Carvers Creek State Park. I'm not allowed to burn out of the park. Got my burn boss in 2015, so I've only been burning for about 2 years. So they have different categories of burn bosses and what you can and can't burn in longleaf pines. So that's the only place I'm allowed to burn as a burn boss.
Burn boss is like, we could put that underneath your name. Would that be accurate, or is that like a?
I mean, my official title is park ranger, but when I'm out, basically if the fire gets out and something happens, I'm liable.
Okay.
Because the permit is in my name and I'm the one who's, bossing it today. So that's basically.
Us to get a ride back to where the cars were, so we could leave the area. Well, our plan was to leave the park.
Okay.
To grab lunch and then come back.
Okay.
Is there somebody who could be spared that could take us out? Because this looks like it's going to take a couple more hours to because we've got all our sources here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I might back up your truck just a little bit just to get it out some of that heat. But where
it's not difficult to get out of here once I get you to your van. It's just you just follow the dirt road all the way out.
Well, actually, we just had to change some plan, and then we won't have to leave in the midst of this. That would probably be better.
It'd probably be better because I think Jimmy is in
3% drop since the last report. Winds are still light and variable with a south component.
burn boss copies.
Give me a copy.
Keep copy.
Good copy. firing this way out of the north. So when we came up this line, you know, it was just pushing good just from the wind eddies over there and how open it is on the other line. So when it was pulling off, and I rounded the curve just to get a little definition on the curve just to kind of anchor it in. Boy, that thing took off, and it was 60-foot flame lengths in no time. It was impressive. You had to look in on the other unit, that's for sure, making sure there's no spot over.
We'll get Jeremiah.
All right. So I guess first off, how does a controlled burn affect the tick population?
Well, there's not a whole lot of science on that, but the science that we do have, it will reduce ticks in a stand that's been burned, but it has to be a fairly large burn to have a long-standing impact, or the ticks will move in from the side. So locally, it'll have a good effect, small acreage, but if you really want to have an impact on the tick population, you have to burn large areas, hundreds of acres, on a fairly frequent basis.
Will this burn kill any ticks?
Oh yeah, ticks don't move very fast. So if there's a tick inside that area that's black now, that tick is probably dead. So not many people mourn the loss of a tick. So.
What is the purpose of this burn?
Well, there's always multiple purposes. Most of the time, State Parks is trying to restore the natural community, and that's what we're trying to do here. This is a former pine straw plantation where they intensively managed it for pine needles for mulch. And so we're burning it to restore the ground cover. When you burn the ground cover off, burn all the vegetation off, which acts like a mulch, it frees up the seed and the grasses that are in the soil to sprout up and then hopefully get a natural community back where there used to be just pine straw. There's always secondary, tertiary reasons as well. So we're trying to reduce the impact of future wildfires, should there be a wildfire. By reducing the fuel, you're literally just taking away the fuel for the next fire. So if there was a fire to come in here in the next few years, there'd be a lot less fuel than there is today, and therefore the intensity of the wildfire is going to be less. And then there's usually, especially in a longleaf pine stand like this, we're trying to control the hardwoods, and fire is very effective at controlling hardwoods, which will, again, like the mulch on the ground, will shade the ground and keep the grasses and herbs from growing.
Why do we need to help the hardwoods?
Well, we're trying to actually reduce the height of the hardwoods. So we're not trying to help the hardwoods so much as we are trying to keep them in a few feet tall rather than letting them get big and bushy. So much of the longleaf pine forest in the United States from fire suppression has allowed the hardwoods to get out of control, if you will. And so it's a much more broadleaf-based community than it would be with regular fire. So we're not trying to help the hardwoods, we're trying to shorten the hardwoods, give them a haircut. It's not going to kill them, but it moves them back to ground level so that they are part of the ground cover as opposed to being a dominant part of the forest.
And this is pretty exciting. I mean, how does it feel?
Oh, fires are always exciting. If you don't get excited on a fire, you shouldn't be on a fire, because it keeps us on our toes. So everyone's new. You learn something on every fire. So I've been doing it for a lot of years, but it's always exciting to get out on a fire, especially on a beautiful day like today.
Have you ever gotten burned?
I have never gotten burned. I've gotten warm, but I've never gotten burned. The biggest danger from wildfire or from prescribed fires like we're doing today is not from people getting burned. We're very careful about doing that. But there are other threats out there that actually pose a greater danger. Insects, ticks, reptiles, rattlesnakes, holes, stump holes, things that you trip on, trees falling, that sort of thing are probably something we need to pay more attention to than the fire as far as danger goes.
Biologically, what's the most important part of this forest that's being burned?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't think that there is a most important part biologically of a forest. A forest is a community. It's made up of everything from the microbes that are in the soil to the insects that are living on top of a 100-year-old pine tree. So I don't think I would define something as more biologically important than another. There are things that are rarer than other things, and if you wanted to call them more biologically important, usually the rarest things in a longleaf pine stand are the things that are growing on the ground. And that's true here.
If this forest wasn't being burned, what would it look like?
It would look like what most people see when they look at forests in North Carolina, which is a collection of maples and sweet gums and shrubs growing up sort of impenetrable. You see in maybe 10 or 15 feet, maybe 50 feet, but you wouldn't be able to look across the landscape of the forest. So this would fairly quickly, you know, in 100 years without fire in here, this would look like a predominantly maple sweet gum forest, I suspect. And there you wouldn't hardly be able to tell about the longleaf anymore because your view would be blocked by leaves from the hardwood trees.
Have you ever been bitten by a tick?
Oh yes, I have been bitten by ticks. Everybody that works in the woods has been bitten by a tick. I've never gotten Lyme or any of the other tick-borne diseases, but I certainly know people that have.
We're gonna have to live with the airplane because we gotta go. Go ahead.
So I was just wondering if you can tell us, like, what's going on with this fire and how is it biologically important?
So the sandhills of North Carolina, from a natural community standpoint, essentially most of the plants and animals here thrive with fire. They evolved with fire over time. So combination of the habitat condition being improved and the cover and food values being improved on an area is why fire is vital to this area of North Carolina.
When you say food values, what does that mean?
So soft fruits, blueberries, huckleberries, those are big fruit items because most of the sandhills from a nutritional standpoint from plant composition is it's sand. It's relatively low nutritional value. So there's not that much to eat, to be honest. So when you start creating those soft fruits, it gives the animals more and more to eat. So fire will improve an area for those plants to exist.
How does a fire like this affect like insects, spiders, and ticks?
So most of your spiders have a hard time getting away from it on a ground level. They can easily get away from it by scurrying farther up the trees, but that's kind of a catch-22 because the heat's rising. So you're going to get some mortality from the spider scenario. You're going to get some mortality from some of your insect group scenarios on a small scale. But inevitably, because you're improving the plant composition, more insects can thrive. So insects from the surrounding areas will move back in when the plants sprout here in the spring, and the insect populations may actually be higher.
Will the tick populations be higher too?
The ticks are kind of an interesting scenario because fire should create some direct mortality for ticks in that approximate area, but ticks use host organisms is the easy way to put it. For most ticks, mammalian ticks, their host organisms are deer and small mammals. Small mammals being mice, shrews, things like raccoons or possums. Most of our fires are not killing mice, raccoons, so we're not directly affecting those that are riding around on the small mammals, but any of them that are just hanging out in the vegetation, mostly the adults at this point in the year, we're creating mortality with.
Have you yourself ever been bitten by a tick?
Over the course of my career, I've been treated 4 times.
Oh, wow.
For a tick-related illness. Up until recently, the diagnosis for most of those illnesses was difficult. So the lucky part in that is they're pretty much all treated the same way.
How do you prepare for ticks? Do you do any precautionary measures?
We wear tick impregnated clothing that will minimize the number of ticks you receive and the tick viability. It actually kills the ticks.
daily tick checks from being out in the field. So if a tick happened to get past the clothing, then we're making sure that they're not attached. We're taking them off ahead of time. The typical sprays that people can buy as a consumer at a store, those will deter ticks. But you're never going to come out in the woods and not run into ticks.
So I see like a fire behind you. You get to, sounds like you get to, involved with animals a lot. Almost sounds like the perfect job.
I don't have any complaints. I don't have any complaints. It's really fun and interesting professionally to work with fire. It's fun and interesting to work with the small mammals, the birds, the larger mammals on a large landscape. And I mean, my background's in both wildlife biology and in forestry, so I'm also interested in the plants. So the fire effects, any of the things that we do to manipulate a site to improve it, quote unquote, more in line with what it, the natural state it should be, piques my interest.
I would ask you questions that I should have asked you that I didn't, but either related to ticks or to this particular habitat.
Is there any questions about ticks or this particular habitat that I might have missed? Anything you wanted to add?
The habitat itself, like I said, has plenty of ticks. No matter how much fire we put on the landscape, ticks are going to always be here. They've been here for tens of thousands of years. They're coming into prominence now because as a culture, we're moving closer and closer to the forests and moving into the forest environment. So our exposure from our own adventures is increasing, our chances of encountering them. The medical side of ticks is dramatically improving, so we're learning stuff between the entomologist and the medical staff working hand in hand now. We're learning stuff new every day. The diagnoses are getting better, the tests for diagnoses are getting better, the medical treatments are improving. So it's not out of the question that over the course of the next couple of decades, we'll see the medicine improve, and ticks, while there'll always be a potential problem, their overall danger, for lack of a better way to put it, may decrease.
Do you think climate change is influencing tick population?
That's a hard one, because we know the variation just from the records that we can look at, from the ice records, from the sediment records, from dendrochronology studies with tree rings. We can tell when the earth was cooler, when the earth was warmer. Ticks have been around that entire time. So it's unlikely that warming will affect them in a detrimental way in any form or fashion. There's a potential chance, I guess you could say, because it's a warmer climate, that the lack of cold temperatures in the winter could conceivably result in more adults surviving the winter. But that one's one of those that it would take a large scientific study and a lot of years to figure out.
I think we don't have B-roll of Jimmy though, do we?
No, we don't.
We don't.
Can I stop?
Yes.
You all ready to go again? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. You glad that class is over?
All right, Jimmy, I'm feeling behind you.
Nick, we'll send you in first again, and then Preston, and then I'll follow.
There were a lot of junctions you passed. How we're going to be
Get out of there. It's a firebug.
So they're coming back, so we're going to be in fire
Oh, I get the hot side.
Yeah.
How about the hot side? Holy cow, it's getting hot. Where's the gas tank?
Oh, we're...
Getting done, that sounds the reason I was looking that way.
Here we go. Were you in the Army?
We're rolling.
All right. So before we start talking about the prescribed burns, I wanted to ask a little bit about the epidemiology of tick-borne disease. Let's first talk nationally.
Well, let's first have him give us his title and how he wants to be identified.
Okay, right. So first, let's begin with what your name is, what your title is, and if you could spell out your name, that would be great.
I'm Steve Meshnick, S-T-E-V-E, first name, last name M-E-S-H-N-I-C-K, and I am a professor of epidemiology and the associate chair of the department and a professor of microbiology and immunology.
Great. So again, what are the numbers? What is the epidemiology side of tick-borne disease?
Well, the most serious tick-borne disease in the United States is Lyme disease. And they're estimated to be about 300,000 cases per year of Lyme disease. But it's concentrated geographically, so the vast majority of cases are in the Northeast or Upper Midwest, although it occurs elsewhere in the country as well. And then there are some other tick-borne diseases, babesiosis, ehrlichiosis, anaplasmosis, and spotted fever, rickettsiosis. And so those occur elsewhere. In North Carolina, the one we're most concerned about is called spotted fever rickettsiosis, or more commonly known as Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And there are probably anywhere between 500 and 1,000 reported cases a year of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in the state alone, but there are probably a lot of cases that are not reported.
So why are so many people not reporting their cases?
Well, part of the reason is it's difficult to diagnose. So if someone has a tick bite and then gets a fever a week later, often physicians just prescribe doxycycline, and the germ that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever is very susceptible to doxycycline. So I think they don't feel there's a need for a test.
How effective is doxycycline then?
It's 100% effective. I mean, there are a few cases where people are allergic to doxycycline, and then it's difficult to treat them, but it's highly effective.
So when people do get bitten, what's the percentage that actually get infected with disease?
That's a really good question. And one of the issues is that there are different species of ticks in North Carolina and elsewhere. And the tick that supposedly spreads Rocky Mountain spotted fever is the dog tick. And a very high percentage of dog ticks are infected with the bacterium. But again, we're really not sure of how often it's transmitted. The longer the tick stays attached, the better your likelihood of getting infected. Most of the ticks that we're bitten with, probably more than 90% of the tick bites, are from Lone Star ticks. And Lone Star ticks carry a rickettsia, a bacteria that's related to Rocky Mountain spotted fever, called Rickettsia amblyomyi. And we suspect it's causing a lot of the disease that people think is Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but we still don't know.
How long do people have then till sort of they get the tick on them and then till infection?
Right. Okay.
How long do people have?
Well, see, that's the kind of Achilles heel of the tick, which is they don't bite right away. They usually land. They'll land on your clothing. They'll land on your hand, and then they'll search around for a good place to attach. And they may wander around for hours. So really, the best way to prevent infection is to do a tick check. So if you've gone out in the woods, or when you're taking a shower, just look around for ticks. So if you're not bitten, there's no chance of infection. Once they bite, the longer they stay attached, the more likely you are of getting infected. And then symptoms, the fever might occur a few days later, 3 or 4 days later, a week later. And at that point, when you just have a fever, it's totally treatable. There's no, 100%, it's 100% curable. The danger is if you don't get treated right away, you'll start getting a rash. And by the time you get a rash, you're really sick, and it's still treatable, but there is some mortality associated with it.
So moving on to the prescribed burn side, can you talk a little bit about the effectiveness of prescribed burns or these controlled burns on reducing tick populations?
Well, yeah. But first, maybe I should tell you how do you determine tick populations? Do you know how that's done? No. Well, so what they do are what called tick drags. So they'll take a piece of fabric and they'll kind of drag it along a surface, and then look at it when it turn it over, flip it over, and count the number of ticks that are attached. And there's pretty standardized ways of doing it. So you can really, when you do a drag, you can tell how many ticks were there, and you look at what stage they are. Some are larvae and some are adults. From what I gather in the literature, so park rangers and people who go to parks are often at higher risk of exposure because there are a lot more ticks in parks. And so the question is, do these prescribed burns control the population? And from what I gather from the literature, they may have a short-term effect on tick populations, but in the end the ticks will come back. So they don't have a, they're not bad for the tick population, but they're not exactly what you would call an intervention to control ticks. I think they have a transient lowering of the tick population. These studies are also kind of hard to do because because there's a lot of different ecosystems involved, and there's different vegetations and different types of trees and different types of underbrush and different species of ticks. So often you'll find things that are different from state to state or from park to park. But in general, I think the consensus is that controlled burns will have a transient effect, but not a long-term effect.
So let's talk a little bit about more on prevention, but more on this clothing that.
Well, before we do that, let's get the clothing so
Okay.
we can talk about that. Do we? No one tell.
Okay.
We agree.
Whoops. Okay, so if you had to pick between, if you had to choose between a prescribed burn or sort of this impregnated clothing, permethrin impregnated clothing to prevent tick bites, what would you choose?
Well, so there, in general, for vector, it's called vector control because a vector is often an insect or a bug that spreads a disease. So there are two ways to control vectors. One is environmental, and one are personal protection measures. So, and they can be done at the same time, or they can be done, independently. Environmental control of any arthropod is difficult because often it'll involve spraying or it'll involve sort of interrupting the normal ecosystem somehow. Personal protection measures is an individual decision, and you make up your mind to protect yourself. And there are lots of things you can do to protect yourself from tick bites. The simplest one is to wear long sleeve shirts and long sleeve pants, because the ticks, if they land on you, they'll land on the outside of your pants, and then you might see them or they might fall off. But sometimes it's really hot, you don't want to do that. Then there are repellents, and so DEET or permethrin spray will work. They'll repel the ticks. They're not 100% effective, but they'll work. Permethrin often you'll apply to your clothing instead of your skin. And then you can buy permethrin impregnated clothing. And what that means is it's basically clothing that was treated in a factory in such a way that it has permethrin almost built into the fabric, and it slowly pops out. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to remember each time to spray yourself. So the permethrin treated clothing, you can launder it, you can wear it for up to a year and still get really good protective efficacy. So I think the issue is of making a personal decision that you don't want to get bitten. Environmental control for ticks is really difficult. There's been some discussion of, for example, about culling deer. So I think I think it was in Cape Cod where they had they tried culling deer and killing all the deer and seeing if it affected the tick population, and it seemed to, but transiently. They tried repeating this elsewhere and it had no effect. I do think that the sort of recent increase we've seen over the past, say, 50 years in things like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Lyme disease has been to the growing deer population. But it's not really clear what we can do to control the deer population.
Thank you, Cody. You might just have one question I didn't ask that you'd like me to.
So, is there any question that you like me to ask, something that I haven't covered, something that you think is important to this discussion?
I think that tick-borne diseases are interesting and they're common, but they're really sort of understudied. And I think that, in fact, they're hopefully we can come up with new preventive measures or new treatments. But right now, there's a lot that we don't know about ticks and tick-borne diseases.
That's great. Excellent. So
This young lady right here.
Okay.
Let's focus on the clothing.
Okay.
Look right at her.
Okay.
Anytime.
So can you please show us what this clothing is and what it does?
So this is an example of long-lasting permethrin-treated clothing. This is what was worn by a North Carolina park ranger for a study that we did a few years ago.
And what did you find in this study?
So this was a randomized controlled trial. So we took about 170 park rangers, and half of them wore treated clothing and half of them didn't. And they went about their normal activities, and it was blinded, so we didn't know who was wearing the treated clothing and who wasn't. And they were great subjects. They were really interested, so they would collect the ticks off themselves and put them in little jars and send it to us. And send us weekly tick logs, and so we knew exactly who was bitten, when, and by what kind of tick. And some of the park rangers got 100 tick bites in a week, so they were pretty heavily exposed. And at the end of the study, we unblinded it, which means we figured out which was the control group and which was the treated group, and found that the park rangers wearing the treated clothing had 85% fewer tick bites than the rangers not wearing the treated clothing. By the way, it wasn't just rangers, it was also North Carolina forestry service workers.
And when you say treated, what do you mean?
So the way they do this is, so there's a company in Greensboro called Insect Shield, and they were our collaborators on this. So they have a sort of magic formula which is proprietary, and they're not telling anyone, but they can put the clothing in a certain kind of oven with the permethrin, and when it comes out, the permethrin is probably hydrogen bonded to the fabric. It's very tightly connected to the actual material in the fabric, to the point where it's released very, very slowly, so you can wash it 50 times, and even after 50 times, it still retains its repellent activity.
So 50 times, how long would you say that is?
What we found in our study was that we had really good protection for 1 year, but in the second year of wearing, we didn't get good protection. So we think that the clothing works for about a year. Should I still keep this
Yes,
up?
please. You're doing great. I'll shoot close-ups later.
Okay.
Did you all find any adverse effects of wearing this chemically induced or impregnated clothing?
No, we had none in any of our studies. There are people who are permethrin, who have allergies to permethrin, and not in this study, but in a more recent study, we found somebody who got an allergic reaction. But it's pretty rare. The one issue that comes up is supposedly permethrin is bad for cats. So so I think we told our park rangers to keep it away from our cats. Permethrin, by the way, is originally from an insecticide that was found in plants, in flowers, and so this isn't the actual natural product, but it's a synthetic version of the natural product.
You might have one more question you want to ask about the life cycle.
Sure, but should we have him?
Yeah, you can put the shirt down.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about tick biology and sort of their life cycle.
Right.
So if you could walk us through what that looks like.
So the eggs are laid by by the female, and the first stage is called a larvae, and the larvae are really, really hard to see. They largely live on rodents, so they'll go through a whole season living on rodents, and then they'll fall off and they'll molt and become nymphs. And then in the next season, they'll usually pick a larger host, maybe a deer or a human. And then they're still pretty small, then they'll molt and come off, and then finally they'll be adults, and then they'll usually pick a large host to live on. So there are 3 stages, and they often have 3 different hosts.
And in those 3 stages, can they transmit disease in any of the stages?
Yeah.
Well, I guess
the larvae can't because they're not infected yet, but the larvae can become infected, and then they can transmit the disease.
So last thing we would like would be a kind of a setup shot. Bob, do you have a suggestion?
No, we need more than that. He blinded me with science. If we only had like 6 cameras, we could do it all in one tape. It's just me. Yeah, that looks great.
And put them on their clothing, and they figured out what group they were in.
Wow.
So not completely blinded.
Right.
I guess I should have asked, what is it about permethrin?
We can ask them off camera.
Yeah, let's ask him off camera.
In other words, he's starting tight on here, and he wants to see your hands go into the frame.
Okay.
As he's rolling. So.
Okay.
So just wait until he says.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
In action. I want you to take it and move it on that. There you go. Let's do it again.
Okay. Take,
I wasn't
you don't have a
clear.
little thing with it. Take
Yeah.
2.
Take 20. No.
We need a set clothing folders.
We need wardrobe.
Wardrobe.
And
Okay,
makeup.
that's what you
Right.
call it.
Oh,
Wardrobe.
thanks.
There we go.
Stand by and action. Perfect. That's all I needed.
Okay.
Okay, action. Okay. One and action. Action. We got it. We're good. They're both circling. I'm rolling. Well, that's all that counts. You like it. You don't need to know anything. This is great.
So I think is it still going?
Oh, it's still going.
Everybody good?
Yep.
All right. Hold on there, bud. We're leaning on your side. So all these strips you guys are seeing that are coming down, these are those flanking strips that Jimmy and his ignition crew are interior. They're running from the Charlie to Alpha line down this way. They're running these strips down. And the closer together, the less intense, the further apart they are. Where do you guys want me to stop so you can talk to John? Because he's right there.
Scenario, you're going to get some mortality from some of your insect group scenarios on a small scale, but inevitably, because you're improving the plant composition, more insects can thrive. So insects from the surrounding areas will move back in when the plants sprout here in the spring, and the insect populations may actually be higher.
Will the tick populations be higher too?
The ticks are kind of an interesting scenario because fire should create some direct mortality for ticks in that approximate area, but ticks use host organisms, is the easy way to put it. For most ticks, mammalian ticks, their host organisms are deer and small mammals. Small mammals being mice, shrews, things like raccoons or possums. Most of our fires are not killing mice, raccoons, so we're not directly affecting those that are riding or around on the small mammals, but any of them that are just hanging out in vegetation, most of the adults at this point in the year, we're creating mortality.
Have you yourself ever been bitten by a tick?
Over the course of my career, I've been treated 4 times for a tick-related illness. Up until recently, the diagnosis for most of those illnesses was difficult. So the lucky part in that is they're pretty much all treated the same way.
How do you prepare for ticks? Do you do any precautionary measures?
We wear tick impregnated clothing that will minimize the number of ticks you receive and the tick viability. It actually kills the ticks. Daily tick checks from being out in the field. So if a tick happened to get past the clothing, then we're making sure that they're not attached. We're taking them off ahead of time. The typical sprays that people can buy as a consumer at a store, those will deter ticks. But you're never going to come out in the woods and not run into ticks.
So I see like a fire behind you. It sounds like you get to, involved with animals a lot. Almost sounds like the perfect job.
I don't have any complaints. I don't have any complaints. It's really fun and interesting professionally to work with fire. It's fun and interesting to work with the small mammals, the birds, the larger mammals on a large landscape. And I mean, my background's in both wildlife biology and in forestry, so I'm also interested in the plants. So the fire effects, any of the things that we do to manipulate a site to improve it, quote unquote, or to in line with what the natural state it should be, piques my interest.
Is there any questions about ticks or this particular habitat that I might have missed? Anything you wanted to add?
The habitat itself, like I said, has plenty of ticks. No matter how much fire we put on the landscape, ticks are going to always be. They've been here for tens of thousands of years. They're coming into prominence now because as a culture, we're moving closer and closer to the forest and moving into the forest environment. So our exposure from our own adventures is increasing. Our chances of encountering. The medical side of ticks is dramatically improving. So we're learning stuff between the entomologist and the medical staff working hand in hand now. We're learning stuff new every day. The diagnoses are getting better. The tests for diagnoses are getting better. The medical treatments are improving. So it's not out of the question that over the course of the next couple of decades, we'll see the medicine improve. And ticks, while there'll always be a potential problem, their overall danger, for lack of a better way to put it, may decrease.
Do you think climate change is influencing tick population?
That's a hard one, because we know the variation just from the records that we can look at, from the ice records, from sediment records, from dendrochronology studies with tree rings. We can tell when the earth was cooler, when the earth was warmer. Ticks have been around that entire time. So it's unlikely that warming will affect them in a detrimental way in any form or fashion. There's a potential chance, I guess you could say, because it's a warmer climate, that the lack of cold temperatures in the winter could conceivably result in more adults surviving the winter. But that one's one of those that it'll take a large scientific study and a lot of years to figure out.
We don't have B-roll of Jimmy though, do we?
No, we don't.
We don't.
Can I stop?
Yes. So after Bob takes you.